The Jedi spoke of peace, yet they carried weapons of war. They claimed to seek balance, yet they rejected half of the Force. They stood before the galaxy as wise guardians, yet they fought in its bloodiest wars. For generations, they were seen as noble, selfless, and just. But were they truly the peacekeepers they pretended to be? Or were they something else entirely? To be a peacekeeper is to mediate without violence, to listen without judgment, to bring order without force. But the Jedi wielded their power as both a shield and a sword. They dictated morality, decided who was right and who was wrong, and eliminated those who did not conform. They were not neutral observers. They were warriors who shaped the fate of the galaxy through battle, not wisdom. They warned against fear, yet they feared change. They spoke of detachment, yet they clung to their traditions with unshaken devotion. The Jedi did not just follow the Force, they tried to control it. They believed they were the light in the darkness, but in their arrogance, they could not see the truth. They were never the guardians of peace. They were the enforcers of a system that used them as weapons. The Jedi Order did not fall because of an external enemy. It fell because of its own failures. It allowed itself to become an extension of the Republic's military. It waged wars in the name of peace. It destroyed those who challenged its way of thinking. And when it was finally betrayed, it was not because the Jedi were too weak. It was because they had lost their purpose long before the Clone Wars even began. In this video, we will uncover the truth about the Jedi, and why they were never the peacekeepers they claimed to be. We will expose their contradictions, their hypocrisy, and the consequences of their rigid beliefs. The Jedi were not protectors of peace. They were warriors who fought under the illusion of righteousness. And that illusion is what led to their downfall. The Jedi always spoke of peace, but their actions told a different story. They sat in their ivory tower, cloaked in robes of wisdom, yet they wielded weapons of war. A peacekeeper does not carry a blade meant to end life, yet every Jedi carried one as if it were an extension of their very soul. They told the galaxy they only fought when necessary, but they trained for battle from childhood. A Jedi was taught to suppress emotion, yet they were expected to fight for justice. How can one fight for something they are not allowed to feel? The contradiction is obvious. They were warriors, yet they pretended to be monks. A true peacekeeper mediates without force, but the Jedi carried power with them wherever they went. Their presence alone was a threat to those who opposed them. The Jedi Council claimed to be neutral, but their history says otherwise. They aligned with the Republic, fought in its wars, and enforced its laws. A real peacekeeper would remain separate from politics, but the Jedi sat beside senators, whispering into the ears of those in power. They claimed they served the people, but they only served those who agreed with their ways. If a peacekeeper must fight, then they have already failed. The Jedi were soldiers wrapped in the illusion of diplomacy. They did not guide through wisdom alone, but through the presence of their lightsabers. They were not neutral protectors of peace. They were enforcers of a republic that used them as weapons. The Jedi preached against attachment, yet they formed bonds with one another. They told their students to let go of fear, yet they feared the very emotions that made them human. They warned against anger, yet they fought with passion when their beliefs were challenged. They demanded balance, but only embraced one side of the Force. How can one claim to seek balance, yet reject half of their own existence? The Jedi feared the dark, yet in their fear, they became blind. They refused to acknowledge that the Force was not just light or dark, but something greater. A peacekeeper understands all sides, but the Jedi dismissed anything that did not align with their narrow vision. They claimed to defend life, yet they determined who was worthy of saving. They fought Sith, as if their destruction was the only answer. They never sought to understand them. They never tried to bring them back. They simply saw an enemy and struck them down. A peacekeeper seeks to heal. The Jedi sought to eliminate threats before they could grow. If peace was their true goal, why did they refuse to change? Why did they cling to rigid laws that ignored the reality of the galaxy? A true peacekeeper adapts. A Jedi only follows the rules set by those before them. They were not seekers of wisdom. They were prisoners of tradition. The Jedi claimed to serve the Force, yet they bent to the will of the Republic. They did not protect the galaxy. They protected a government that wielded them like tools. A true peacekeeper is not bound by politics, but the Jedi were deeply entwined with the Republic's rule. They fought its wars. They executed its orders. They silenced its enemies. How can a peacekeeper be loyal to a system built on corruption? The Republic was not a force of good. It was a machine, and the Jedi were its gears. They claimed to uphold peace, yet they waged war without hesitation. They led soldiers into battle, took lives in the name of democracy, and justified it all as necessary. If the Jedi were truly neutral, they would have walked away from the Clone Wars. They would have rejected their role as generals. Instead, they embraced it. They became warriors, commanders, leaders of destruction. Peacekeepers do not wage war, yet the Jedi did so with the blessing of the Senate. They did not just fail their code, they abandoned it. When the Republic fell, the Jedi fell with it. Not because they were betrayed, but because they had already lost their way. They were never separate from the Republic. They were a part of it. And when the Republic turned to the Empire, the Jedi were seen for what they had always been. Instruments of power, not keepers of peace. The Jedi fought to preserve peace, yet their existence only brought more war. They trained warriors, not negotiators. They hunted Sith, not understanding them. They feared the dark side, not learning from it. The Jedi claimed to be above violence, yet violence followed them wherever they went. Did they not see the pattern? Every time they tried to wipe out the Sith returned stronger. Every time they imposed their order on the galaxy pushed back. They spoke of balance, yet their actions created more imbalance. They were not peacekeepers. They were catalysts for conflict. If the Jedi were meant to bring harmony, why did they always leave destruction in their wake? The more they interfered, the more chaos spread. They turned planets into battlegrounds. They turned students into warriors. They turned peace into war, and war into genocide. A true peacekeeper does not seek to control. The Jedi tried to shape the galaxy in their image, and when it resisted, they fought back. The cycle never ended because they refused to break it. They could not see that the greatest threat to peace was their own unwillingness to let go. The Jedi were not wiped out because of one Sith Lord. They were wiped out because they had become blind. They ignored the warnings, dismissed the signs, and believed they were untouchable. They had grown arrogant, and arrogance breeds destruction. A peacekeeper does not let pride cloud their judgment, but the Jedi did. They thought their code was absolute. They thought their way was the only way. They saw Anakin Skywalker as a threat, but they never asked why he struggled. They treated him as a weapon, not a person. And when he fell, so did they. Their failure to understand him was the same failure they had repeated for generations. If the Jedi had truly been peacekeepers, they would have seen what was coming. They would have questioned their own mistakes. They would have listened, but they didn't. And because of that, they were wiped out. Not by a greater power, but by their own refusal to change. The Jedi were never the guardians of peace. They were warriors who thought themselves above war, and in the end, their own war consumed them. The Jedi were never what they claimed to be. They were never the keepers of peace. They were soldiers of the Republic, enforcers of a system that saw them as tools. They carried weapons, waged wars, and destroyed those who opposed them. That is not peace. That is control. A true peacekeeper does not force their way onto others. A true peacekeeper listens, understands, and seeks harmony. The Jedi did not do that. They imposed their beliefs, rejected anything different, and called it justice. They did not seek balance. They sought dominance over the Force itself. Their downfall was inevitable. Not because of the Sith, not because of Palpatine, not because of a chosen one. It was their own doing. Their refusal to change, their arrogance, their blindness, that is what destroyed them. And in their destruction, the galaxy suffered. If they had been true peacekeepers, they would have learned. They would have seen their flaws, embraced the whole of the Force, and walked a different path. But they did not. And so, their legacy is not one of peace. It is one of war, loss, and regret.